Microphone check. Our community Q&A today is from a gal we will call Sarah, who wants to know if she is still married in God's eyes. Hello, I'm Amy. This is Ask a Christian, a small channel devoted to authentic discussion around Jesus, God, the Bible, and Christianity. If you have a question you'd like to ask me about these subjects or any other one, you can email me at AskAChristianFriend@gmail.com. I'm going to read you Sarah's question minus some of the details that might expose who she is and abbreviated for time. It says, I married a guy in February and the pastor did not file our papers. We were told to take the papers to the court and file ourselves. The guy took the papers and would not let me file. Within 2 days, though, he had left me. March 16th, he told me he couldn't do it. He didn't feel the same way anymore. He ripped up the marriage license and threw it away. I took that as my answer and that God had released me from that marriage. In my spirit, I feel as if it was our divorce, but I have a friend who says that he's my husband regardless of what I feel or think. I'm so confused. I need to know, in God's eyes, is this guy really my husband? The short answer here, Sarah, I believe is no. Even if you guys had been in a covenant relationship, it seems like he has abandoned you, which both Moses and Paul talk about as legitimate reason for divorce. But there's more nuance to it, of course, and so let's talk about it. All right, let's dish. First of all, this is so unbelievable. I am so sorry this happened to you. If anybody has had a similar situation, this just sounds devastating. And I don't know the situation surrounding it. Obviously, I just have your view of it. I'm trying to understand what was going on in this man's head, that he would go through any kind of ceremony for a wedding and then leave that quickly after. I'm curious. I want to know, was there lots of pressure from your family or his or from you? Did he have a history of waffling? I mean, there's just so many things here to be curious about. I'm also wondering if there were any witnesses, if it was just you, he, and the pastor. If there were witnesses, I might call on them before I totally gave up and said, can you talk to this man? Because he made a promise before all of us, and as part of our wedding party or as part of our circle of trust, I would love it if you would try to figure out, is this really what he wants to do? Here's a little bit more background, and some of it I think really applies to your situation, Sarah. In the Old Testament, even God's people had big problems with staying true to their marriage vows. God's people are still people and still subject to having really selfish hearts. Now we have a higher standard, and so it doesn't excuse us, but Moses had to address this with the people several times. Basically, he had to call out the men of Israel saying, okay, if you're going to take a second wife, which, was not ideal anyway, but if you're going to take a second wife, then you cannot cut off the love, the care, and the physical support that your first wife is due. If you are not going to take care of somebody, you need to present them with a certificate of divorce. You need to let them be free to find someone who will take care of them, or to go back with their parents and family to take care of them. So that was, Moses's godly way, apparently, of addressing this situation. And I think that applies to you. I think that we're talking about neglect in your situation, if not abandonment. And this is just kind of what you're dealing with. And again, none of this was optimal. None of this was part of God's plan. Jesus comments on the sad state of humanity and of Israel in Matthew 19, verse 8. It says, Jesus said, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning, it was not so. Not God's plan. Only made allowance for this because of our hardness of hearts. Another passage I'd love for you to consider as you're kind of getting into this discussion is Paul's comment in 1 Corinthians 7, 12 through 15. It's kind of longer, but stick with me. To the rest I say this, I, not the Lord. If any brother has a wife who is not a believer and she's willing to live with him, he must not divorce her. And if a woman has a husband who's not a believer and he's willing to live with her, she must not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband has been sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife has been sanctified through her believing husband. Otherwise your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. But if the unbeliever leaves, let it be so. The brother or sister is not bound in such circumstances. God has called us to live in peace. How do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife? Nevertheless, each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned them, just as God has called. I read a couple extra verses there. The message is this. It's clear to me just from these two passages and the surrounding context. If your husband was a believer, he has abandoned you and you are free to divorce. If your husband was an unbeliever, he is not willing to live with you and you are free to divorce. I want to say this one more thing, knowing that it's probably super controversial and somebody's going to be mad at me for saying this, but a covenant is not a contract. When you make a covenant, you say, better or worse, rich or poorer, as long as we both shall live. You said that before God and man. So, even though this guy is pulling all kinds of crazy stuff, if there is any part of you that wants to witness to this man, maybe keep going. Maybe don't call it just yet. Maybe keep praying about it. And I know that you having 2 kids, you're going to want as much financial and emotional support as you can get. Totally understandable. So again, if you chose to walk away, I believe that you are biblically right to do so. But just like Paul says, wife, how do you know that you would not save your husband? So I'm going to leave it at that. I want you to think about it and pray about it and see if you can be an example of covenantal, other-centered love that might draw him. He might see something in you that makes him think about how good God is and how merciful God is. All right, that's it for me today, Sarah. I just wanted to reiterate one more time. Thank you for sending your email. I am so sorry that you've been having to deal with all of this, and thanks for letting me be with you on the journey. Until next time, everyone, I'm wishing you joy and peace for your journey wherever it leads you. Bye for now. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. I wanted to let you know something. I actually do Bible studies with people in person and on Zoom, and I've got a couple openings coming up in late November. And so I wanted to invite you, if you're wanting to study more about the Christian faith, I promise you no coercion. I just want to be a friend. I can show you some things that I know, but really I'm a fellow journeyer. So if you want somebody to read the Bible with, discuss some thoughts with, I would be honored to do that with you. Just hit me up at AskAChristianFriend@gmail.com and we'll find a way and a time to make it work. Thanks so much.